I packed my own bag that morning. That part I remember clearly, because I was so proud of myself for not forgetting my charger this time. We were driving back from my grandmother's house in Flagstaff. 8 hours in my stepfather's truck, me wedged in the back seat between a duffel bag and a cooler that smelled like lunch meat. I was 19, not 17, not a little kid. 19. Old enough that what happened next had no excuse. None. It started the way arguments in that truck always started. Small, stupid. I said something about the music. He had country playing so loud the bass was rattling the cup holders. And I didn't demand, I asked if we could switch to something else for a while. My mother turned around from the passenger seat and gave me that look. The one that meant I had just made a mistake she was going to file away for later. "You've been complaining since Flagstaff," she said. "I haven't said anything since Flagstaff." The sighing, she said. The eye rolls. Don't think I don't see it. I put my headphones in. That was my mistake. She hated when I put my headphones in. Said it was rude. Said it was my way of shutting her out. Said a lot of things about what my headphones meant about my character. So I took them out and stared at the window instead and watched the desert flatten out into nothing and told myself 4 more hours. Just 4 more hours. My stepfather said something to her in a low voice. She laughed. Then she said, loudly enough that I would definitely hear, "I don't know why she even came. She makes everything worse." I said, "I came because you asked me to." She turned around again. "Don't use that tone with me." "I'm not using a tone. I'm telling you the factual reason I'm in this car." There it is," she said. "There's that attitude. You wonder why nobody wants to be around you." I stopped talking. I was good at that by then. The stopping, the swallowing it, the telling yourself it doesn't matter. I had been practicing that skill my whole life. We pulled into a rest stop outside of Kingman. I needed to use the bathroom and I said so. My stepfather pulled in without a word and parked near the vending machines. I got out, took my phone, left my bag because I was coming right back. The bathroom was one of those concrete block buildings with the fluorescent lights that flicker. I was in there maybe 4 minutes. When I came out, the truck was gone. I stood there and I actually looked around. Like maybe I had the wrong row. Like maybe he had pulled forward or something. There were a few other cars, an RV, a minivan with a sticker family on the back window. No silver truck. I called my mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I texted, "Where are you?" Then, "Are you serious right now?" Then, after another minute of standing there with the sun already pushing 90 degrees, "My bag is in the truck. My wallet is in my bag." She texted back 11 minutes later. "We need you to think about how you speak to people. This is a lesson." I read that text about 6 times. Each time I read it, I thought I had misunderstood it. Then I understood it completely. I had $43 in my phone case. I always kept emergency cash there. My grandmother had taught me that, and the clothes I was wearing. My phone was at 62%. I did not have my wallet. I did not have my ID. I was 400 miles from home in Kingman, Arizona in July. I went inside the rest stop building and sat down on a bench near the water fountains. I needed to think before I panicked. I called my aunt, my mother's older sister, the one who actually liked me. Her name is Ruth. I always called her Aunt Bet. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, where are you?" I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She did. What do you need me to do?" The problem was distance. Aunt Bet lived outside Phoenix. What do you need me to do? The problem was distance. Aunt Bet lived outside Phoenix. Coming to get me was a 3-hour round trip, and she had my cousins with her. I told her to give me an hour to figure something out, and if I couldn't, I'd call back. She made me promise to call back either way. I went to the woman working the small concession counter inside and explained my situation. Not the family drama part, just the practical part. Stranded, no car, limited funds. She was maybe 50, wearing a vest with the state park logo on it and she looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as tired but kind. She told me there was a Greyhound station in Kingman proper, about 6 miles away. She let me use the landline to call them. A ticket to Tucson, where I was in school, was $68. I had 43. I called Aunt Bet back and she Venmoed me $40 before I finished asking. Then I waited 2 hours for the man from the rental car company across the parking lot to finish his shift so he could drive me into town. He'd overheard me asking about ride shares and came over himself and offered. His name was something like Douglas, older guy, probably 60, with a wedding ring and a Diamondbacks lanyard. He bought me a water bottle from the vending machine first, which was such a specific small kindness that I almost started crying in front of him. I didn't. I thanked him and kept my voice steady. He dropped me at the bus station without asking for anything. I thanked him again through the window. He waved and said, "You're going to be fine." I don't know why that helped. It did. I sat on that bus for 6 hours. I stared out the window and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the time I was 12 and forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer, and she didn't speak to me for 4 days. I thought about how I learned to read her moods like weather, the particular set of her shoulders that meant the day was going to be hard, the way she laughed too loud around company and then came home and turned cold. I thought about my stepfather, who was not a violent man, not even a particularly unkind one in small moments, but who had, in 8 years of being in our lives, never once contradicted her. Not once. Not even when I was 12 and crying in the kitchen because she'd told me I had my father's personality, which she meant as a devastating insult. He had just walked past. I thought about how I had told myself for years that this was just how families were, that this was love, just expressed differently. That I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much of everything the way she always said. And sitting on that bus, I thought, no, this is not that. I got back to Tucson at 11:30 at night. My roommate picked me up from the station. She didn't ask a lot of questions, just handed me a sandwich and let me sit in the passenger seat in silence until I was ready to talk. When I told her, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "You know that's not normal, right?" I knew. I was starting to know. I didn't call my mother for 3 weeks. When she finally texted me, not to apologize, but to ask if I was coming home for Thanksgiving, I wrote back and said I wasn't. She called immediately. "I cannot believe you're going to make this a thing. You left me at a rest stop. You were being disrespectful. I was 19. I was in the desert. You took my wallet. Your wallet was in your bag. You left your bag." I want you to notice what she just did there. I left my bag because I went to the bathroom and expected the car to still be there. But in her version, the bag being left was my choice, therefore my fault. Therefore the whole thing was my fault. That was how she worked. That was how she had always worked. You couldn't win an argument with her because she did not experience arguments as a search for truth. She experienced them as a competition. And she had no rules. I said, "I'm not coming home for Thanksgiving," and I hung up. I didn't go home for Christmas either. I told myself it was because I was busy, because I had plans, because it was too far and too expensive, which were all partially true. The real reason was simpler. I didn't trust her. I had loved her my whole life and tried to earn her approval my whole life, and she had left me on the side of a highway to teach me a lesson. And I had finally let myself register how serious that was. I finished school, got a job in Denver, built a life that was genuinely mine, with people who didn't require me to manage their moods or shrink myself down to fit their comfort. I went to therapy, which was the single best decision I have ever made. My therapist used the word conditional once, as in, the love you grew up with was conditional. And I had to take a minute before I could respond, because something about hearing that word applied to my own life broke something open in me. I called Aunt Bet every couple of weeks. I knew some things about what was happening at home through her. My stepfather had changed jobs. They had moved to a different neighborhood. My mother had started going to church again, which Aunt Bet said with a tone that told me everything about how it had gone. I asked Aunt Bet once if my mother had ever mentioned the rest stop. She paused for too long before she said, "Not really." Not really meaning never, or not really meaning once, and weirdly. She said you overreacted. I let that sit there between us for a moment. Okay, I said. Thanks for telling me the truth. I had a half-sister I didn't talk about much. My stepfather's daughter from before he married my mother. A girl I'll call Thea, who was 8 years younger than me and who had grown up watching my relationship with our parents from a safe distance. We had been close when she was small, but as she got older, she had slowly been absorbed into my mother's version of events. I understood it. It was easier to be on my mother's side. I had tried that too. Thea was the one who sent me the invitation. I came home from work on a Thursday evening in April to find a cream-colored envelope in my mailbox. Nice paper. The return address was my mother's house. I stood in the lobby of my building and looked at it for a full minute before I opened it. It was a bridal shower invitation. Thea was getting married to a guy I'd heard about exactly once in a brief text 18 months ago that just said, "I met someone, he's great." The shower was in 6 weeks. My mother had handwritten a small note at the bottom of the invitation. "It would mean a lot to Thea if you could make it." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I've been thinking about what happened." Not, "I miss you." It would mean a lot to Thea. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter. I made dinner. I sat with it for a week. I called Aunt Bet and she said, "It really would mean a lot to Thea. She asks about you." I called my therapist and we talked about what I wanted, what I needed, what I was afraid of. I made a list of things that could go wrong. I made a different list. What would it mean if I went and didn't say anything? What would it mean if I just let it keep being the version of events my mother had written? I called Thea directly. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, and she sounded startled to hear my voice. We talked for 40 minutes. She told me about the fiancé, about the apartment they were moving into, about how excited she was. I told her I was happy for her. I meant it. Then I asked her, carefully, what she knew about why I didn't come home anymore. Long pause. "Mom said you two had a falling out," she said. "That you got really distant after college. Did she say why?" "She said you were going through stuff." I asked her if she knew about the drive back from Flagstaff. She didn't. My mother had never told her. In Thea's understanding, I had simply drifted away for no reason, become one of those people who just decides family doesn't matter to them. I told her what happened. All of it. The argument. The rest stop. The $43, the 6-mile ride to the bus station from a stranger, the 6-hour bus ride home, the 11:30 pickup, the call where my mother said I had left my own bag. Thea was quiet for so long that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "She's never mentioned any of that," she finally said. "I know. I thought you had cut off the family. I didn't know it was the other way." "I know." I told her I still wanted to come to her shower. I told her I wasn't coming to start a fight or to blow up her day. I was coming because I loved her and I wanted to be there for her, but I also needed her to understand what she was asking me to walk into. She said she understood. She said she was glad I called. She sounded shaky, the way people sound when they've just had the floor shift under them. The shower was in my mother's backyard on a Saturday in late May. I drove down from Denver. I wore a yellow dress because yellow is not a color you wear when you're trying to be invisible, and I was done being invisible. I brought Thea a gift, a beautiful cookbook she'd mentioned once in passing that I had been holding on to for months, just in case. There were maybe 30 women there. My mother's friends, some relatives I recognized, Thea's bridesmaids, a few people I didn't know. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived. She came out, saw me, and her face did something complicated. She smiled. It was the smile she wore in public. "You came," she said. "Thea wanted me here." She hugged me briefly. Her perfume was the same. 23 years of that perfume, and it still made something small in my chest go tight. I sat with Aunt Bet and helped pass food around and watched Thea open presents and tried to just be present for it. For a while, it worked. Thea glowed. The fiancé's mother was lovely, the kind of loud laughing woman who fills a room with warmth. I ate a piece of lemon cake and let myself feel, for a moment, that maybe this was just a party, and I was just a person at a party. Then my mother gave a little speech. She does this at events. She loves the microphone moment. She talked about how much she loved Thea, how proud she was, how she had always known Thea would find a wonderful man, because Thea had always been such a thoughtful, warm, giving person. She talked about how she had tried to raise her children to be resilient, self-sufficient, able to handle what life throws at them. I heard Annbeth make a very quiet sound beside me. Then my mother looked at me, directly at me, in front of 30 people, and said, "I know we've had our bumps, but family is family." I think she expected me to smile and nod. I think that was the script. I smile and nod, and the past gets quietly buried in a backyard in Scottsdale, and everyone goes home feeling good, and nothing ever gets said, and in 10 years we do this again at someone else's party. I stood up. I want to be clear about something. I didn't plan this moment. I had told myself I would be quiet. I had told myself this was Thea's day and I would protect it. And I had meant both of those things when I said them, but standing there, watching my mother use me as a prop in her narrative about what a good parent she was, something in me just stopped. I said, I need to say something. 30 heads turned. My mother's smile stayed on her face, but it went very, very still. I said, I want everyone to know that I love Thea, and I'm so happy to be here today. I paused. And I also want to be honest, because I think this family has spent a long time not being honest. I looked at my mother. You left me at a rest stop outside Kingman when I was 19. You took my bag, my wallet, my ID, and drove away and texted me that it was a lesson. I had $43. I took a Greyhound bus home. I've never gotten an apology. The silence was the loudest thing I've ever heard. My mother said, "This is not the time you just called me out in front of 30 people." I said, "You said we had bumps. I want people to know what that means." She looked around the yard. The fiancé's mother had stopped smiling. Aunt Bet was sitting with her hands folded, expression neutral. Thea was looking at me with wet eyes. My mother said very quietly, "I was trying to teach you." I was 19, I said. I was in the desert. You drove away. Another silence. And then, I don't fully understand why this happened, or what shifted. My mother put her glass down on the table next to her. She looked at her hands, and she said, I shouldn't have done that. Not, I'm sorry, not the full thing, but something. A crack in the wall that had been there so long I had stopped seeing it as a wall at all. Thea got up from her chair and came to stand beside me. She took my hand. She didn't say anything. She just stood there. The party sort of quietly rearranged itself after that. People refilled their plates. Conversation started up again, quieter than before. The fiancé's mother came and touched my arm and said simply, "Good for you." I nodded and sat back down. My mother and I didn't speak again that day. She was across the yard when I hugged Thea goodbye, and we looked at each other from a distance, and she gave me a small nod. I don't know what the nod meant. I'm not sure she knew either. I drove back to Denver that night instead of staying over. I had the windows down. The highway through New Mexico was dark and wide and empty in the best possible way. I thought about the girl who had stood in that rest stop parking lot in July and read the word lesson on a phone screen and tried to make sense of it. I thought about everything she had done since then. The bus ticket, the apartment, the job, the therapy, the years of quiet work it takes to unwrap yourself from a version of events that was never true. I thought about Thea holding my hand. I didn't fix my family that day. I want to be clear about that too. One moment at a bridal shower doesn't undo years of silence. My mother and I have a long way to go, and I don't know yet if we'll make it there. What I know is that for the first time, the true version of events existed in a room with her in it. She couldn't take that back. I got home at 2 in the morning. I made tea and sat on my couch and called Aunt Bet. "You doing okay?" she said. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I think I actually am. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that day. Not in any mystical way, just the plain, quiet logic of it. The choices people make have weight. They land somewhere. My mother chose to drive away from a rest stop outside Kingman and call it a lesson. That choice didn't disappear. It just traveled forward in time the way things do, until it showed up at a bridal shower in Scottsdale wearing a smile and expecting me to smile back. I used to think resilience meant absorbing things quietly, that the stronger person was the one who didn't make a scene, didn't bring it up, didn't need anything acknowledged. I spent years believing that. I built a whole identity around being the one who was fine, who had moved on, who didn't need an apology. And on the surface, that looked like strength. I finished school. I got the job. I built the life. But underneath it, I was still 19 years old in a parking lot, reading the word lesson on a phone screen and trying to make it make sense. What I understand now is that there's a difference between enduring something and actually processing it. Endurance is just time passing. Processing is harder. It requires you to look at what happened and call it what it was, not what the person who did it wanted it to be called, not the softened version, not the one that protects everyone's feelings at the expense of the truth. What my mother did was not discipline. It was not a lesson. It was a choice made by a person who had more power than me and used it carelessly, and the fact that she never said so out loud didn't change what it was. One of the most important things I've ever done for myself was stop letting her definition be the operating one. That's the part nobody tells you about growing up in a home where someone rewrites reality constantly. You don't just have to heal from the things that happened. You have to heal from the version of yourself that learned to see through their eyes. That took me longer than anything else. Theo holding my hand that day, I think about that a lot. She didn't have all the information for years. She had grown up with one story, and I had grown up with a different one, and neither of us had chosen that. When I told her the truth, I wasn't trying to turn her against anyone. I was just tired of a lie being the foundation of every room I walked into, and she stood up. That meant something. I didn't get a full apology that day. What I got was 3 words and a crack in a wall. That's less than I deserved and more than I expected, and I've made a kind of peace with that. Some people are not capable of the full thing. What matters is whether you require the full thing before you let yourself move forward. I don't. Not anymore. The drive back to Denver that night, windows down, New Mexico dark on both sides, I kept thinking about the girl who had done all of this. Found a bus, made a call, kept going. She didn't have anyone telling her she could do it. She just did it because it was the only available option. I want to give her more credit than I usually do. She figured it out. In the heat, with $43, with no plan. That's not nothing. I think that's the thing I'd want anyone to take from this. Not that families are fixable, because sometimes they're not. Not that the truth always lands perfectly, because that day in that backyard it landed like a grenade and we're still sorting through the debris. But that you are allowed to carry the true version of what happened to you. You are allowed to say it out loud. And the life you build after someone tries to break you, that life is yours. Not despite what they did. Alongside it,